Bonjour mesdames et messieurs, in this episode, my friend Kelvin Pimon shows you how to make this composite. Bonjour mesdames et messieurs, my name is Serge Germany. I am a French photographer from the beautiful city of Paris, France. And I make 2 tutorials per week. Click here if you want to subscribe to my daily newsletter and get access to hundreds of free tutorials, raw files, preset, Lightroom brushes, everything for free. All you have to do is subscribe. Or click here to subscribe to my YouTube channel. Alright, in this episode I want to present to you my best friend and buddy Kelvin Pimon, who is coming out with a new course called Photoshop 101. The whole idea of this course is to take you from an intermediate, you know a few things about Photoshop, into a much more advanced. And he's giving for free the first lesson of his course, so you can see for yourself. We're going to be doing this composite of him in Manhattan. He's the man I learned Photoshop from, and I've been learning for the last 12 years. You will get a link to subscribe to his channel during the video and check out this course on my website, Photoshop 101. Here is the first free lesson.
Okay, so to get started, you're going to open up this folder, and in the source files you have a getting started. So that's what this first video is going to cover. So to start, I want you to open up the nyc.jpg in Photoshop. For me, it's double clicking. If by default you don't have it, just hit open with, and you got Photoshop. Okay, so here you go. It'll open it up. And if your window doesn't look like this, there's 2 things you can do. One, go to Essentials over here, and there's the preset, the layout of all the palettes. So click on Essentials. If it still doesn't look like this, click on Reset Essentials, and it'll put back how Essentials looks like when first installed. Okay, and the other thing is, as you can see, I have the application frame, which is by default. And if you took that out, you can put it back by clicking here, Window, and Application Frame. All right. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is go back to the Finder here, and we're going to open up this smoking.psd, and that's a photo of me here that's already cut out. And we will learn how to do this later, but for now I just want you to learn some of the basics to get started. And so you see that there is a thing attached to this layer over here. This is your layers, by the way, and this is called a mask. All right, and you can see from this that there is transparency. That's what this little checkered background represents. It represents transparency. So the first thing you're going to do is take this with this move tool. I'm just going to undo this here. This first tool here is called the move tool, and to take this layer and put it onto the NYC JPEG, you're going to have to take this and then roll over this tab, and then while still holding the mouse button down, and let go here. All right, and you can see over here in your layers palette, which is over here, you now have this picture, this layer rather, and with the move tool you can move them around. All right, so very first principle of Photoshop is you have layers, and photoshopping an image or creating composites is essentially done by creating layers and manipulating layers. So in this case, this was already pre-cut out, which is nice, so you can put it in front of an image like this, and I can move it around and do what I want with it. So that's the layer, and you can see there's a little small representation of what's on that layer here. Okay, and that's this layer. A quick little note: this was originally a raw file taken with a camera, so it's not a JPEG, it's a raw file format. And when you manipulate those kind of files in Photoshop, Photoshop opens up what's called Camera Raw. So to see what that looks like, you can double click on this little icon over here, and it'll open up Camera Raw, as you can see. And it shows that it was shot with a Sony, but you don't have to get into that detail. Right now, all that we're interested in, some of the basics, I want you to be familiar with this, because if you open up a raw file from your own camera, you will go through this step, and you'll say, well, how did he skip that step? Well, essentially, I already did this to prepare for this first project, so that you can just learn some of the basics. All right, and here you have some some of the basic preferences. You can change the temperature and the tints, exposure, contrast, and so on. All right. So I already prepared this file exactly how I want it. So I just wanted to show you that. All right. So cancel. So this layer is essentially a link to this raw file, which is why that little icon shows here. Okay. All right. And one of the tricks, one of the things to know is a good composite is made by blending multiple layers together. So right now we have these two layers, but you can tell that they were not shot together. This is much darker, stronger contrast. This is lower contrast in the background, and it kind of has a tint. Okay. So one of the first things we're going to look at is, so we know that we have layers. Over here you have a thing called opacity. So if I click on this and I lower it, it's actually making this layer kind of semi-transparent. So that's what the opacity of the layer is, okay? I'm going to keep this back to 100. And another very important part of manipulating layers that you should know is the transform, okay? And that you can go in here and you edit and transform, free transform. This is something you will get to know very, very well and use a lot. Command T or Control T on a PC. And by holding down the Option and Shift key, we can make this bigger by keeping the width and the height, maintaining that aspect ratio. Otherwise, we can make it really skinny or very flat, but we don't want to change that. Okay, so just make it bigger like this, and then hit Return, or click on this little checkbox. Okay, and now I've made this little this outline bigger, and this person now is a little more in front. Maybe a little too much, but let's bring them down a little, something like this. I think this is probably right. Okay, okay, something like this. And so now we know we've talked about the layers, the camera raw, and the Command T for transform. These are very, very important things. If you ever want to come back, you can go hit Command T, and now I have these bounding boxes, and I can make them bigger and smaller. Now look, if I don't hold down the Shift, you see I'm changing the aspect ratio. You do not want to do that. So I'm just going to hit Escape, and it's going to reset and cancel out that free transform. Okay. And so in the next part of this, we're going to address adding some other elements and then making these different layers fit together better with color and contrast. Okay, so in this next part, we're going to go and find the other elements. So let's go back to the Finder here, and we have smoke and sky. All right, so we can just go ahead and open both of these up. And so we got the smoke over here, and we got sky over here. Okay, so let's start with smoke. I'm going to go ahead, same as before, with the Move tool selected. Take this and drag it over to newyorkcity.jpg, and then once I'm over here, drop it over. Okay, all right, and so we just want the smoke to show, not the black. So there is a neat little trick that you should that I'm going to show you right now, which is if you want anything that's black to disappear but have the white still show, there's a thing called the blending mode. So blending mode is how this layer interacts with whatever is below it. And in this case right now it's set to normal, which means it's just opaque wherever I paint on it. And if I use that eraser, which I can show you here by taking the eraser tool, I can erase stuff from here, and it would erase part of this layer, which I do not want to do. So I'm going to undo that. But if I go here, and there's a lot of different modes to go through, but for now, let's just keep it really simple. And if you do screen, you'll see that the black is transparent and the white is not. So that's pretty simple. All right, go back to the Move tool, or V, and I'm going to do a transform again. So Command T, or you can do it up here, transform, free transform. And I'm going to right click over anywhere on this layer here, and I hit flip horizontal. Okay, so now it's the other way. And I'm going to shrink this down. Now the smoke, I'm not too concerned about squeezing in one way or the other because it's smoke. It's kind of, it can be whatever, it could be squeezed like this, not like a face, which would look completely distorted. All right, and I kind of want to rotate it, so just stick outside of the transform box, and it becomes a rotate. So that's kind of cool. do something like this. I can use the arrow keys if I want to just do a few short movements. So something like this. I kind of like the way this looks, and I'm going to hit return. Okay. Now, if I zoom in, which you can do Command and then the plus, or you can zoom in here, down here. You can change this, or you can use the zoom tool. Zoom in to, you see 50%. Zoom in again. You see that line right there? That's because it was a straight edge. Okay. So we want to fix that. We're going to take the eraser tool and right-click, and here it tells you the size and the hardness. So we want something. See, this is too big. All right, let's make something maybe 80. That seems right. About something like that. Maybe a little smaller. And then if that means hardness is at 0. So if I go ahead and erase some here, all right, it's very soft. You see that edge is very soft. I want it to be a little harder for this edge over here and a little smaller. Okay. This edge needs to be just a little, there you go, something like that, right? And I can take the move tool again, and with the arrow key, down, 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 left, 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 bring it down, something like this. Another thing I want to do is bring it behind. So I bring it behind, I drag it behind the outline of me, all right? So if I move it now, it's always going to stay behind this other layer. Isn't that cool? All right, so bring this like this, something like that. Okay, let's zoom out. So take the zoom tool again and hit the Alt. See that it becomes plus and minus. So Alt goes behind. Okay. So now we see that smoke. It's pretty good. However, it's pretty strong. I suggest you can double click on here and hit 60. So 60% opacity, so that that smoke is a little more transparent. Okay. And the other thing we want to do is go and find the sky here. And same thing with the move tool. Click and drag and go over here and drop it there. And we're going to bring it down here below the smoke. Okay. Now I'm going to hide me. And by the way, as soon as you start adding a few layers, it's a good idea to start naming them. So to name them, you just double click here and you can, let's call this man. And then this is the smoke. All right. We'll double click this and call this smoke. Oop, my caps lock was on, so smoke like this. And then this is the sky, or clouds. Let's call this clouds. Okay. And the background can remain background. Okay. So then I'm going to hide this, and I'm going to hide this. What I want to do here is select the entire part that is the sky. All right, because I want to add these clouds in the sky. So to do that the easiest way, select this tool here, which is the quick selection tool. And the size 28. Sample all layers should be on, and you should have this selected, okay? And then now what I'm doing here, I'm automatically, look at that, it automatically selected the whole sky, all right? For this first example, usually when we do selections, we get a lot more detail and make sure that it's very clean. But just for this first introduction and getting started, we'll keep it this simple, okay? So we have the selection, and now I can go into the clouds. I click on the clouds layer, all right? So here I have the background layer selected. Now I have the clouds layer selected. And earlier I mentioned the mask. Now what do masks do? Masks basically hide certain parts and reveal other parts of a same layer, okay? So here if I click on this add layer mask, while I have this selection, it'll turn this selection into a layer mask. See what it did? It created this layer mask, and it hid everything that was outside of the selection, all right? So if I now go and move this, it's going to move the clouds and my mask at the same time, all right? So we don't want to do that right now. What we do want to do is manipulate the sky, but leave the mask be as it is. So that's what this little chain does, this little link. So we can unlink it, and now notice how this, I now have the layer selected, this has the mask selected. So keep a close eye on which you have selected. If I select the sky now, I can move the sky within, and it doesn't move my mask. So it's very important, okay? And black conceals, white reveals. That's sort of the golden rule with masks in Photoshop, okay? We want the clouds to show in the back because it's right now it's without, it's just a simple gradient, just to get a little more texture. And I recommend turning this layer, this time instead of screen, we'll go into, let's try soft light, okay? And now if I put the smoke back and the man back, let's take a look at the sky. Command T. So I can go and transform while it's in this sort of transparent state. I can squeeze this to see if there's any more texture I can get in there. And it's a little more texture. It's just a little more dynamic. It's not quite as flat as it was. Okay, hit OK. It is kind of hidden by the fact that there's smoke coming out of the cigarette, so you don't see the clouds as strongly, but it does add a little more texture. Okay, so now we have our clouds, our smoke, and our man. And while we put all our elements in the right place, it still feels like they don't belong together completely. The smoke and the clouds are pretty good, but the man doesn't belong in the same street. So the reason for that is this has a different white point or temperature as the background, and it has a different contrast. Okay, so let's go ahead and fix that. The first thing we're going to do is reduce the contrast of this front layer. Now, in showing you this, there are many other ways to do this, and the more advanced you get, the better and more complicated techniques you'll find. But for now, I just want you to I want to show you the more simple way to attain this good result. Okay, so we're going to create what's called an adjustment layer. Okay, what that means is I can go in here and say edit. I can adjust, for example, the brightness and contrast of this layer. Okay, so I can say less brightness, less contrast, more contrast. Okay, now these things will affect this layer, and then it'll be affected, and I can no longer come back and change that. However, with an adjustment layer, if I go here, click on this and do brightness contrast, now it's created this layer that basically does the same exact thing. In this case, I want to lower the contrast. All right. Now you'll notice it's doing it to everything, the background and this, right? Look, if I hide it and reveal it, it's doing it to both. So what you want to do is you want to make sure that this only affects this layer. How do I do that? Hold on the Alt key, and you notice when I hold the Alt key, the icon changes, and it's basically going to make a mask. And it's the same thing that you have right here, and this adjustment affects all layers below, right? So if I click on this, now it's only affecting this one. See? Before, after. Only this one. So this is tied to this layer, okay? For this example, we're going to use the legacy. So it's the older method of brightness and contrast. It's a little more destructive, but just for this example, make sure you check that. So now when I lower the contrast, it's much stronger, and increase the brightness. Well, actually, let's leave the brightness by as it is. So essentially, I don't want the dark in here to be any darker than this. So let's try minus 25 is pretty good. Okay. All right. Now we're going to try to give it the same tint, and we're definitely going to tint this whole image. So let's create a new adjustment layer, and this time we're going to use what's called a photo filter. Photo filter is essentially, imagine you're taking a photo, and instead of an ND filter, you have a warming or a cooling filter. So that's what that is. In this case, we're going to click up here, and we're going to take a cooling filter, and we're going to crank it up, the density pretty high up. Okay, now it's definitely cooling down this whole photo. But look at how these two somehow feel like they belong. They're more together than they were before. Yes, they definitely have a bunch of different colors, and I'm exaggerating this look, but it's so that you can really see it. Maybe tone this down a notch, 30 or even 25. Okay, something like this. And but somehow that white point is more even between this and this. Okay, there's maybe a little more contrast in here, so we can adjust that. But like I said, I want to get you started in understanding some of these basics. And then one more thing is I'd like to make the skin tones of this person, of me, warmer, nicer. So let's create another one, and photo filter, this time warm. And let's crank it up quite a bit. And you have different ones. You have this number 2, number 3. Kind of like this one. Let's do this, okay? Now, totally canceled out the blue in the back. But what I want to do is I want this for the skin tones. So remember I said the black conceals, white reveals. Right now this whole mask is totally white. If you click on here to make the foreground black, and then you go to edit fill, let's foreground color or black. Let's just do black like this. Now it's all hidden. This doesn't make no difference at all. So now we're going to take a look at the brush tool. Click on the brush tool over here, or hit B, and let's zoom in, which you can do by doing a command plus or minus. Minus zooms out. Okay, we can hide this for now. Okay, and in the brush right now it says opacity is 50. Let's bring that down to 30. Okay, so that when I brush, and I want to brush white on my mask. Let me just show you first. I'm going to make a layer here, and let's just pick a color like red so you can see what I'm talking about. At 100%, this red looks like this. Okay, this is what the brush tool looks like. And if I bring this down to, say, 30, now my red looks like this. All right, it's transparent. All right, now we don't want to brush these colors on here. What we want to do, so I'm going to go ahead and delete this layer. What we want to do is in this mask that warms it, so let's call this cool and warm. I want to make the skin tones warm. All right, so with a 30% opacity, and let's go ahead and make this a little bit smaller, something like 200. Okay, I can go in here, and with the white, I'm brushing. Okay, and you can see it slowly warming up the skin tones. Right, I'm painting essentially on here. The spacebar turns your cursor into the hand tool so that you can move your artboard around. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and warm all this up, something like this. I kind of go a little bit further just so that it doesn't have a sharp edge. Okay, let's do the hand as well. That's pretty good. All right, and if we want to, let's just make a 350 size. That's much bigger. And just kind of go over it just so that I don't have any too strong edges. Before, after. Now, I could do a perfect selection, but for now, I really want you to get the feel of how and why we're doing this. So I'm going to zoom out again. And before, after. We could argue that it's a little strong, so we can tone this down a bit. Okay? So it's a little more neutral. But look, before we changed the color, it was like this, and then after, granted we lowered the saturation, or sorry, the contrast and saturation, it blended everything together. Here it looks like it was copy pasted, and here it looks like it could have been taken, the photo could have been taken right in front of there. All right, so that covers the brush tool and the opacity. We did the little eraser. We did some basic selections, and you've seen how the masks work. So very important. Let's go ahead and save as, and we'll save it right here, and we'll as a Photoshop document. That way it maintains all the layers. If you save any other format for now, we'll get into some more detail, but for now just make sure you save it as a Photoshop document, and save, and there you go.
Bonjour and bienvenue, welcome on my website. Do you want to get hundreds of raw files from all over the place where you can play around with? Do you want to get amazing free Lightroom presets, free brushes, free Photoshop actions? All you have to do is enter your email address. You will receive an email, you can then create an account, and then you can access this free lesson tab. You can choose from over 200 free lessons. Every free lesson is going to have source files for you to download and play around with. It's a great way to learn photography, learn post-processing for nothing. No money, it's all free. It's a gift to you as a member of photosearch.com. So thank you and welcome, and let's do some photos together.